I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network.
This is James Altucher. Very happy to have as my guest Brian Koppelman, who wrote some of my all-time favorite movies, including one movie that maybe ruined my life, which is called Rounders, about poker. Brian, I have you completely to blame for that. You know,
it just makes me so happy to know that.
during the year, well, I'm just going to get right into it. During the year after Rounders came out, I played poker every single night. So 365 straight days from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. And do you know where I played?
Where'd you play?
I played at the Mayfair Club.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is where, of course, Rounders, you know, ostensibly it kind of takes place, or you based it on.
I mean, yeah, the club that Famke Janssen's character...
Ingrid was always working there.
Right. In real life, it's Ingrid. In the movie, it's Petra. But yes, that's exactly right. Ingrid was definitely the inspiration for that character. And the Mayfair is that club. And then the VFW Hall is the one where Teddy KGB is. And... I played in that club for years, and my partner, who I make movies with, David Levine, and I spent like a year basically researching, playing every night, writing down the things that we'd hear, and then used all that stuff when we went and wrote the movie. I still play in poker games and see Ingrid sometimes.
Yeah. She last time I saw her, Murder Inc. Records was having a private game up in their offices, and she was dealing.
Yeah, she'll do it at these. Oh, yeah, I can't believe you played in that game too. Yeah, that was a great game. I'm loath to talk about those games now that go on with those guys because, I think
it's called Murder Inc. Records for a reason.
Well, no, yeah, but those are they're such sweet guys, Irv and his brother. But like you, I believe people should be able to play poker anytime they want, anywhere that they want. But every few years, I guess, people decide that they should shut these games down. So I never want to let people know really, where they are. As you know, the Mayfair Club got shut down a few years later. And one of my favorite things I've ever written is I wrote this thing in The Observer called Elegy for a Carpet Joint about when the Mayfair got shut down, because I felt like something in the city died when they started shutting down those places where people could gather in the middle of the night, not hurt anybody else, and match wits against one another,
No, it was so great because it was very secure. I mean, you'd have to go through all sorts of locks and everything. Ingrid would let you in. You know, they were very trusting. It was almost like a little bit of a bank. And there was a great restaurant inside the club. Like, I love the food there.
Me too, man. It's also because you love the food, as did I, which probably had a lot to do with just the romance of it. I don't know. Do you ever read this essay by David Mamet called Pool Halls in one of Mamet's first books? He talks about this pool hall in Chicago called Benzinger's and how he would cut school and go play pool. And he would talk about the joy of, the way a cigarette tasted if you would smoke it there when you're playing pool, when you should be doing something else. And I think that had a lot to do with why the food tasted great because, you're underground, you're playing poker. It's really in the gray area of the law. So the plate of pasta that they bring you, I think it just tastes even better because it's got all the stuff added to it.
That's a really good way of putting it. Like there was this sort of kind of historical, almost film that had settled across the club. Like you sort of felt a part of it. And, at the time, I had been working very, very hard for years, and I had just sold my company when Rounders came out, and I realized I had had no fun for the past 5 years, and I had no friends. So suddenly, I lived on 23rd Street, so I would go over to 25th Street where the Mayfair Club was, or 24th, I forget.
24th.
Yeah, and I would go down there, and suddenly I had at least people pretending to be my friend, because you're around a bunch of men basically who are all just telling jokes the whole night, and I'd stay from 8 p.m. till 4 a.m. and of course they're all trying to lie and steal all your money or whatever, or take all your money, but it was just fun. Like everybody's just joking and having fun and playing a game, and it was like a great year for me.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you lived kind of the thing that I lived a few years earlier, which was I would, going to this club and the same thing as you at night, and then you'd leave early in the morning, either with a gangster's roll in your pocket or knowing you had just lost. But somehow, as you'd walk out 4:30, 5 in the morning, and get into a gypsy cab, and or you just had to walk a block, but I would have to get a gypsy cab to head back uptown. So I don't know, is either good or bad. Something just felt right in the world about that there was a place like that existed in Manhattan, and that I had gotten to a place in my life where I found it, was somehow had gained entree into it and could consider myself a part of it. So I agree, and that's why Dave and I wrote the movie about that, and obviously, when I hear stories like from you, but also, Chris Moneymaker started playing poker because of that movie, and Vanessa Selps did, and all the poker pros. I had Phil Hellmuth on my podcast, The Moment. It'll be up in a couple of weeks. And, every one of those guys in some way intersected with the movie, and it had an impact on them and on their lives, which was like super satisfying for us,
Yeah, no,
because
and I'm sure we know a lot of the people in common, but I mean, it was so great because, like I said, it was the first time in a while I felt like I had friends outside of work, and we would even on the weekends, we'd even take a car down to Atlantic City all together, or we'd go to Las Vegas. Like I actually would go places with these people. We would just try to take money from each other or from others.
Well, yeah, I mean that's funny when when you say friends, I mean, yeah, you can make friends in there. But obviously, look, if I'm thinking about who you were then, you were some rich young guy who, you wanted the companionship, wanted the friendship. And I'm betting, I know how smart you are, so I'm sure you got good at poker. But, there's a learning curve. And I'm sure in the beginning, you looked very tasty to those guys when you would walk in.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I couldn't believe the first, let's say, 4 or 5 times I was there, but really I'll say the first 30 times. But
yeah.
It was like there was a vacuum cleaner on my money. So
yeah, that's the point. Yes, I mean, there's the first night I was there, I lost $750, and I remember. That's when I called Dave in the middle of the night, and I was like, "Oh, this is the thing we can write our movie about." But I do remember that I got cleaned out. I mean, of course, I got cleaned out. That's just. That's the price of admission in a way is you have to be willing to go through being really bad at it, figuring out why. And for, smart guys, it's really hard when you feel like a sucker. But if you can somehow muster the inner strength to go back and then ask questions and then,
yes.
Actually ask questions, think about it, read. I'm sure like me, you must have read, I must have read 30 books at the time
yeah,
to
I
try
read
to
every
figure this game out.
Sklansky book. I got
Yep, me too.
a Super System, and I would get it wasn't on TV then, so I would order like these obscure blurry VHS tapes of like World Series of Poker games, and in part inspired by the scene where Matt Damon in Rounders is watching the World Series of Poker.
Well, but that was because we were doing that. I mean, this guy John Schechter, who was always there, he had given me
Schechter started the Source magazine. I know him very well.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, of course he did. And so Schecht's still my good buddy, and he gave me that Johnny Chan tape, and that's absolutely like what I was doing too, was watching that stuff. And there was this one bookstore in Vegas you could order the books from. But hey, James, the way you recommend books to people. So even though Sklansky's theory of poker may be slightly not state of the art in terms of like the ultimate thinking about poker, I think that for all the stuff you talk about on your show, and I listen to your show every week, and I listen to Ask Altucher too, but the Sklansky book, like the fundamental theorem of poker, which is, to make your opponent act in the exact opposite way from the way he'd act if he knew what was in your hand, and things like that, just as an approach to any sort of competitive endeavor that involves not perfect information, some missing information. It's an incredible book to read and really useful, I think, in all sorts of like negotiation and contests.
I agree. I always, now there's these great books where you kind of see hand by hand how a guy like Dan Negreanu might be thinking or whatever. But I thought Sklansky's books were just very solid for just teaching the basics of, pot odds and like you said, this fundamental theorem of poker and so on. And of course, it was then great to go to Las Vegas and actually play against Sklansky in these cash games. It was a lot of fun. So, but
I only played against him once, but I agree. Yes, and there was something really romantic about it in that old era because. Like anything else, it was a world that had its own. It was an insular world with its own customs, its own language, its own semiotics, and so you had to sort of figure out that stuff to be a part of it. Now it's a lot easier to sort of dive into it, but it's still, to me, poker's still a great game. And yes, I'm sure you and I, Pete Olson, I'm sure we know tons of the same people who have been around these places. And do you play still? Do you ever play?
No, because, after I stopped, I figured now if I were to start again, it would take me a good 6 months of solid work and training, maybe 3 hours a day, to get to the level I was when I stopped. Yeah. And, people are at that level. So I know I would need to be good or I would be too frustrated. So I don't want to put that 6 months in.
Yeah, it's very hard. I've recently, for a variety of reasons, started to think about it again, and I've played a few times. But I'll tell you, the thing you can do now is, because I'm sure, like you, I'm friends with a bunch of the best poker players in the world. I can get the quick, I can jump it a little because I can get the sort of pretty quick tutorial.
Yeah, I could probably do that as well. One of my closest friends has been, and he's been on this podcast actually, Elon Schwartz has been a top poker player, and I could probably get up to speed pretty quickly. But, you just move on. Like, I'll tell you, one of the things that happened to me during that year, my first daughter was born. And
sure.
It just, I was praying to God that they would all be put out on like morphine or whatever by the time 8 p.m. started so I could get to the club. And so finally, like my baby daughter is put out and my wife, who's now my ex-wife, of course, was put to sleep. And I get to the Mayfair and Ingrid specifically said, "I'm not letting you in here." And I said, "No, don't worry. Everyone's passed out now. I could come in." And it was the first time I ever played high-low. And, of course, I got a wheel, and they served me a meal for free. And it was just a great night. But it was a great night because of the poker and not because my daughter was born.
Yeah, well, that's when you should probably think about stopping.
Yeah.
I agree. That's when you should probably decide that it's a wrap for a little while.
Yeah.
No question about it.
But let's reel back a little bit because it's fascinating that you wrote Rounders. You also wrote another movie later, much later, which is just, to me, one of my favorite movies. It's like a poem made into a movie, which is Solitary Man. I thought it was a beautiful movie.
Thank you, man.
You've had a great career in Hollywood. You produced Ocean's 13. You've produced a whole bunch of other movies. But I want to reel back even further because it seems like you were never the type of guy to get a job. I mean, I don't think you ever had any kind of 9-to-5 job.
Well, no. Okay, So I want to just one thing, which is, yes, Solitary Man, I wrote and directed with my partner, and I directed it and I wrote it. And then Ocean's 13, we wrote that movie. We didn't produce that movie. The producer of that movie is Jerry Weintraub, was this famous legendary producer. So we wrote Ocean's 13.
Okay.
But, you never want to believe Jerry Weintraub's the last guy you want to take any credit from in the whole world. He's a guy who, ran with Sinatra. So I did have jobs for brief periods of time, but I would say that from a very young age, I knew that I was able to see really quickly when organizations were bullshit, or when the received wisdom was faulty, or when the conventional path was actually really limited. And so there were times when I would embrace those things anyway for some reason, but I did always know that that I had a different sort of ideal road for me. And it was because, partially because I was not a good student when I was young. And hey, James, you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, my computer just I think my computer might have crashed, but as long as the phone is still working, I don't care.
Yeah, we're still recording. Everything's good.
Okay, good. So, when I was a kid, I had pretty bad ADHD, and I'm 48 years old, so it wasn't something that was really diagnosed then, or recognized, or that they'd figured out a way to remediate in any way. So I had the very typical sort of path for someone like that, which was, I would demonstrate a certain thing when they would test me for IQ or something else, but then the work I would do in school was really bad unless I was fascinated by the subject, and then I would do really well. And that whole sort of that dichotomy was really rough and made me very quickly sort of think these supposed experts are basically imbeciles because they can't figure out how to help me learn the stuff I want to learn, or they can't recognize when I'm trying and when I'm not. And I started working at a young age when I was 13 and 14 years old because my dad was in the music business, so I knew about the music business. I started managing bands and producing records and doing all this stuff, and I had enough of that stuff that I was able to get into a good college. Maybe back then if I had read your stuff, I wouldn't have even bothered with college. But I went to Tufts, but while I was there, it was the same kind of thing. Whereas I was at Tufts and I was surviving it, and I could, at college you can pick classes that are interesting to you, so it wasn't quite as bad. But I was very interested in the divestment movement, and which was at the time these schools' endowments were invested in companies doing business with South Africa, and we felt that was the wrong because it was still apartheid, South Africa. And so through organizing this boycott and these protests, I came across the singer-songwriter Tracey Chapman. And because I'd spent all these years around the music business and doing it myself, I was able to recognize that Tracey was this exceptional thing, and began working with her. So how did you
recognize that? Like, there's a lot of good singers out there. So what were the kind of the three things that stood out for you and said, wow, this is not just a good singer, this is a star?
So that's a great question. And as you know, because you've had these kind of insights in life, sometimes those moments are really hard to deconstruct because you've built up a series of references for yourself for a very long time. So I would say all the stuff I'd done leading up to it, like I casually say I'd been around the music business. So somebody could be raised around that and not have done all the stuff that I did, which was, the sort of flip side of ADD, the really positive side of that. And, ADD is way worse when you're young. But the flip side is that when you're interested in something, you have the ability to hyper focus on it and kind of never get bored by that thing.
Right.
And so I knew every record, James, and every musician who played on every record, and every producer, and every word to all the songs, all across the spectrum, every kind of music, not classical, but other than classical music. I knew singer-songwriters inside and out. I knew hard rock, and I could still tell you the drummer and bass player for like every band or every record. And so I was set up to be able to make this kind of evaluation. One. Two, I had an incredibly open mind. You're 19 years old, and if you're somebody who's always looking for greatness in every area, So if you're somebody who wants to find the next great book or the next great movie, and that thing of artistic discovery is just something that was hardwired in me for my whole life. It's still something that I spend a lot of time interested in. So I was ready. Also, Tracey walked out on that stage, and because what I didn't have were any preconceptions or prejudices about what could or couldn't work professionally. I was interested in greatness, and she walked out and she sang with power and authority. She was one of the most charismatic people I'd ever seen. She had a voice like an angel, but beyond all that, the songs were just like true and real. And you could feel the authority in every word that she sang. You could feel the truth of her experience. And then they were presented in this poetically beautiful way. And they were melodically amazing. You could sing along to them if they're hearing them one time. Now, that said, my insight, and I've talked about this before a little bit, but the great insight I got over those next couple of years was that all the people who bought into the conventional wisdom looked at her and they saw something very different from what I saw. They saw an African-American woman who wasn't playing R&B music. They saw a folk singer in a world that had recently turned to drum machines. Mm-hmm. They saw someone of questionable sexuality in other words, it was uncertain sexuality from the outside in a world that marketed these things in a very specific way. They saw protest lyrics in a time that nobody did, and they thought, oh, this can't ever be commercial. I just saw the greatness and thought, well, of course it can be. Do you like the music? Well, I love it, they would say, but my audience. And I'd say, why is your audience different than you? Why is what you feel different than what they're going to feel? And I saw the gatekeepers.
Who would say this, like music executives?
Oh, yeah. Like all the music executives except for one would say it. They would all come up to Tufts and they would see her. I remember, a couple of them, I can tell you very specifically, they would come and see her perform. They would say to me, oh, my God, can I meet her? God, I haven't felt this way since. And they would, Elvis Costello in 78. Can I please meet her? Sure, come meet her. They'd shake her hand, and I'd walk them to their car, and they'd turn to me and they'd say, now you understand, of course, I can't recommend that we sign her. And I would say, no, I don't understand. I don't understand at all. Are you lying that you were moved? No, of course I was moved. I'm a feeling person. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I'd say, well, then, and they'd say, you're a kid. I mean, they would say the things like someone would say in a movie, They'd say, you're a kid. You'll understand later. How could you get it? I know why you love this. And then one guy, Bob Krasnow, who ran Elektra Records at sort of its height, recognized that she was great. And his theory about his record company then was that he didn't care if these things didn't break quickly. He built a company that had the best artists in each area. So he had like the Sugar Cubes and Anita Baker, Metallica. It was like each pocket, 10,000 Maniacs, was like the best thing in its little area. And he felt like if I curate this, I will have cornered a certain niche in the market. I was at a big marketing meeting there where he basically said to me, don't think this is going to be commercially successful. I'm just telling you it's worthy, and so over time she'll be successful. But, I knew because Tracey had a fast car, and it was just very clear. But she didn't have a fast car. In the defense of all the guys who passed and all the women who passed on her, she didn't have fast car, that song, when they all passed on her. But by the time we had the record and we're ready to record the record, then she did have that song. I remember she came to New York and played that song for me and this guy named David Kirschenbaum, and we were pretty floored to hear it.
You went up to her and said, I'd love to represent you. And she looked, so like you said, she had all these characteristics. She was
yes.
Black, protest lyrics, obscure sexuality, and she sees a Jewish white guy from Long Island, and she says, sure,
right.
I'd love for you to represent me. Like, how did that happen?
No, I mean, no, right. No, I walked up to her and I said, I'm here because we're doing this all-campus boycott of classes tomorrow to fight, to pro-divestment rally. And I said, but I have to tell you, Tracey, I've been around this my whole life, and you're so incredibly special. I never do this. And it was always very important to me, to be I'm telling you this, James, to be like independent and not lean on my dad's connections to do this stuff and do it all myself. But I said to Tracey, look, I've done this. I've been managing bands since I'm 13, but I have to tell you, you're so special that I think I have to introduce you to my father too, and that together we can really help you. And And by the way, because I was a bad student, when I then called, and she said no. She said, I'm not interested. I want to finish college. Two things happened. One, I followed her around for the next 2 years. So instead of being at college, if Tracey was playing in New Hampshire at an all-women's club in a small town, I was the only guy in the place. And I did it over and over and over again. I would try to enlist friends to come with me. Nobody would come. I would drive hundreds of miles. I didn't care because I knew I have to show her every day that I'm not going away, that I really believe in this, and that I'm genuine. And at the same time, I was trying to say to my dad, hey, you got to pay attention to this. I don't think I can do this by myself. I don't think she'll listen to me by myself. I was in awe of her. I was 19, and it was very difficult for me to actually engage with her as an equal. I didn't consider myself her equal. I considered her to be so superior to me in every way. But eventually, I went to the Tufts radio station because I had learned that Tracey had recorded songs there for copyright purposes, demos, and I had a friend of mine distract the disc jockey, and I stole the carts that's what you call those tapes, carts, and I went in the back and I duplicated the carts, so then I had a cassette tape of her songs, and then I flew to New York so that I have a tape to play. And then once I played Talking About a Revolution for my father and one of his people, they immediately were like, holy shit, why didn't you say so? And I was like, I've been saying so for 6 months. And then I got them to come up. And it still took years to get her to be interested in this.
So Brian, this is like so critical to the story. Like, you skipped right to the music executive saying no. But the story here is you finding this amazing talent, and then it sounds like she said no to you like 100 times in a row while you
she did.
sacrificed every aspect of your life to win her over, and finally you did.
Well, yeah, that is true. I mean, that's definitely what happened, for sure. But you know what, as you've been through this kind of thing, you know, first of all, there was nothing I wanted to do more than be in a room where Tracey was singing. Like, you know, so yes, it was ridiculous when I would get like the derision I got from the guys that I hung out with, or from my girlfriend, or from people when I would say, you know, I'm going to go, I mean, you know, to wherever it was, as far away as it was, to go see Tracey again. But I didn't mind it. You know, when you're in a pursuit like that of some, like, where you just see, the few times, and everybody has these few moments in their lives, I think, where they see through the matrix for a second. And then sometimes people something has set them up to not believe in themselves and to walk away from that moment. And then sometimes things have set you up to say, I know I did see it, so I have to pursue it. Yeah, and so a lot of my life has been trying to recognize those moments when I've seen the Matrix, and to know, okay, I have, and so now I have to continue on this path. But I have to say, dude, it's fun for me. Like, that's all. And that's really the heart of your question is, I really from a young age knew I wanted to try to build a life where I was not miserable, where I would defy the Thoreau thing, you know, of the mass of all men lead lives of quiet desperation, where I would try my best to be engaged, because the opposite of engagement, boredom, is the worst state for me. And I knew that for me, that meant, by the way, I met my wife at a very young age, and I'm one of the lucky people who I found the right girl. And by the way, it took 7 years for her to say yes. Then when she finally said yes, she moved in that night, and we've been together for 23 years. And so I just was like, well, if I see things or find things that make sense to me in a certain way, I didn't even consider it like a sacrifice. I just considered it like, okay, this is how I'm going to get on my path. By the way, a lot of pain goes along with this stuff. And,
sure, you got said no by Tracey a million times, then no by the music executives a million times. Right. Like, it sounds like it was all pain.
I mean, there's a lot. I'm just going to say, you know, I went to law school at night because I wanted to I read Morris D's book, A Season for Justice, and I thought I wanted to go be a civil rights lawyer. So I finished law school once I started, but I was at night doing that at night while working in the music business during the day. And the whole time, the truth is, the one lie I told myself for the time I saw The Matrix and I didn't follow it was, I really wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be living a life of a creative person. I wanted to be a filmmaker. And I did not have the ability to get that breakthrough till I was 30. So from, you know, like 23 to 30, I was saying no to myself. You know, I was not able to break through to be the thing that I really wanted to be. And that was the only time, really, that I didn't sort of find a way to follow what my passion and my dream was. And
but it might have been for the best, because people who write in their 20s, they don't quite have the experience or the depth yet to really, you know, sort of explore those depths.
That's really interesting. It may be the case, but it doesn't. I think that it doesn't feel that way when you're a blocked writer. You know, when you know that you have this stuff you want to say and you can't find a way to give voice to it. It's a really unpleasant state to be in, because I think that blocked people become toxic, and they become toxic to themselves and to the people around them. And so I started to become more and more aware of that, which is what made me then finally feel like if you don't break through this, you're going to ruin all the stuff that you care about. You know, you're going to harm the people that you care about. You're going to, you're going to have to find other outlets. And so instead, that's how then I decided, okay, I have to find a way to do this. And
I think that's a really valuable way to say it. Blocked people become toxic, and you see it over and over again. Like, people have to, we only have one life. You have to avoid that toxicity because it will kill you.
Yeah, I really think that's true. I've noticed it all around, and the whatever blocked doesn't necessarily mean blocked as an artist or blocked as a writer, but I think what it means is when something starts to die in you, when you've told yourself a story, what Tony Robbins, I guess, would call like a limiting belief that you allow to sort of grow. When you tell yourself a story that you can't be this thing that secretly is the thing that burns the hottest in you, it turns on you somehow. And we've all seen those people. That is where the Thoreau quote comes from, right? Is this, there's a defeatism that sometimes people become suffused with. And when that happens, I think it's very sad, which is why I spend a lot of my time trying to help people not feel that way, and why I've tried to, use myself as an example for that.
Well, now, two stories from your 20s that I want to ask about. One is, in between Tracey Chapman and Rounders, there's Eddie Murphy.
Well, yeah, Eddie Murphy was even before. Eddie Murphy was before. That was when I was in high school.
You're kidding.
No, or just high school, or high school, I think like senior year of high school.
Because
maybe?
Eddie Murphy was already pretty huge by then.
It was before he'd made a movie and when he was a featured player on Saturday Night Live, not a full cast member.
Okay.
So it was because it was in those 4 years when Lorne wasn't on the show. And I think Lorne came back in 84 and I went to college in 84. So it would have had to have been before that. And it was maybe I was in 10th or 11th grade, but I snuck backstage at some local club. He was performing. He was a popular comedian, but I snuck backstage at a show he was playing because I managed the opening act, who was a folk singer. And the folk singer was good, but he was bad casting. He was a Jewish Long Island folk singer, and sadly for him, I wanted to go to Eddie Murphy's show, so I figured out a way to get him to be the opening act. But then he got booed off the stage because they just wanted to hear the jokes. And Eddie was so great that I snuck backstage and met his manager and said, Eddie should be making comedy records, and then went home and I met Eddie, then went home and I woke my dad, and then the next day I put them together, the manager and my father together, and then they made all those 3 comedy albums.
And those are the biggest comedy albums ever.
They were really big comedy albums, and I was really happy to have helped my father in that way, for sure. And I got to spend time with Eddie, which was a riot.
Yeah, do you still, are you still, well, obviously you're still involved in the comedy scene to some extent. Like I read on your blog, you, I don't know how to say his last name, Mike Birbiglia.
Mike Birbiglia, yeah, Birbiglia. I still know a lot of comedians, and I've done. That was part of this thing of when you pursue all this crazy stuff. Is when I was 40, when I was a blocked writer, I did stand up. But at 40, around 40, I was trying to write Solitary Man, and I'm so happy that you love that movie. It's my favorite one of our movies, and it's definitely the best reviewed of our movies. And when I was trying to write Solitary Man, I got stuck again, and I was because it was very personal. There were things I was trying to say, and I don't know why or how, but I decided that doing stand-up comedy was maybe an answer, and so I did stand-up for a year and a half, and so I got re-immersed in that scene and made a bunch of friends who were comedians.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I love the entire stand-up world. Like I used to go to the Aspen Comedy Festival.
Awesome.
I worked at HBO for a while. I've been obsessed with stand-up comedy forever.
Me too. When I was a kid, I would hang out with, I'm sure you remember from the old comedy days, Alan Havey. He's still a really good friend of mine, and he's was like one of the best comics in New York, and I would hang with him from like when I first moved to the city and was in the music business.
I don't know who that is. How do you spell the last name?
Havey. Did you watch Mad Men last season?
Yeah.
He was Lou Avery, the boss, who done Alan Havey. He's a great comedian, but I was around him, and then I've always been around the comedy scene in New York in some way or another.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had some comedians on this podcast. We had Jim Norton,
yes,
Marina Franklin.
I couldn't believe you and Norton grew up together. That killed me.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting there, and which I spoke to Jim about a little bit, is that he was so far beyond everybody else in school in humor, even like as a little kid. And then now you know he's still a great comedian, obviously, and has created a great career for himself. But you have to be really great to be a professional stand-up comedian, because he was orders of magnitude better than everyone else, and we were all funny guys then. But
right,
that's not enough. That doesn't cut it.
No, you have to. I mean, listen, he is. I mean, if you were doing a fantasy draft, I mean, he would be in the first 3 rounds. He's a very important comedian, Jim. But yes, but if you think about it, there are only like 6 comedians at a time who could really sell out a really big room. I mean, he was saying he sells out bigger, places now, but there aren't that many people who can sell out, Russell Peters can sell out, or what Dane Cook used to be able to sell out, or what Aziz can sell out. And you have to have some other things, some giant TV exposure. Right.
So another story, and I hope I'm getting the timelines right, but you mentioned that you lived in an apartment building where Philip Roth,
that's a hilarious. Yes, I did.
And you were always nervous running into him because he might see what books you were reading, because you were reading popular, I guess, genre related.
I would read, but I was. Well, this is again. So no, this is right then when I was like not writing, and I was reading. I mean, like you, I just read a ton of. I've always just read many books, and I would rotate. Then I would read some piece of literature, and then I would read some just popular novel. But Philip Roth lived in my building, and I was nervous that what if he saw me reading crappy books? So one day I left a book at home and didn't bring it with me when I would take the subway to work, because I was like, well, what if I see him in the elevator? And this was an old building with an elevator operator in it, a guy. And then this one day when I left the book and didn't bring it, the subway got stuck, and I had nothing to read, and there were no iPhones or anything back then. And I was like so mad at myself for being so intellectually insecure, and for caring, and for being such a loser that I cared, and also for having the bullshit self-importance to think that Philip Roth would give a shit. So the next time I was reading one of those shitty books, I almost left it, and I said, no, Brian, be a grown-up. Take the book with you. And I get in the elevator, and Philip Roth's standing there. And obviously he must have seen something on my face. Talk about a guy who'd be good at poker. And I tried to hide the book behind my leg. And Roth said, no. What do you got there? What is it? And I pulled it out. And he said, yes, Mario Puzo, the Sicilian. And it was a Mario Puzo book. And then I was like, yeah. And he goes, how did Mario acquit himself? And I said, I like it. And then he looks at me and he says, I know you try to hide what you're reading from me, and you don't want me to see it. But and then he points to the elevator operator, Louis. He goes, but he is on my payroll, and he tells me every day, I always know what you're reading. And then Roth stormed out of the elevator, leaving me to feel like a schmuck.
That's funny. And it's really true, because like, for instance, in the past 2 days, I just started John Grisham's latest book, Gray Mountain, but I had just finished Richard Wright's The Outsider. So it just depends what day you catch me. I could be embarrassed or really proud of what I'm reading.
Oh, that's so funny. And of course you should feel neither state.
Right,
James.
Exactly.
Right, and it doesn't, I mean, just who cares? Nobody should judge what you're reading. You're going to pick up all sorts of stuff from any of it. And also, nobody in their own time ever knows what work is going to end up being considered the important work. So it's just nonsense, and that's all about external approval, which is like the whole battle in life is to feel authentic and comfortable in your skin. So who cares?
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting, though, because all of this reading, again, this is what got you to age 30, having the ability now to write rounders. And you say, it seems like, so I went through your Vines where you have this excellent idea of you're going to give. So Vine is the video service owned by Twitter, where you make 6-second videos, and you have this whole series of 6-second videos about screenwriting techniques. And one of your first ones, or maybe it's the first one, is that all screenwriting books and gurus are bullshit. Don't believe any of them. But what I get out of your Vines is essentially and your vines combined with your movies, is read as much as possible, write every day, and I still think you stick to the 3-act structure. That's what I get from your
Well, I would say
stuff.
this. Solitary Man is a 2-act, really, in the end. Solitary Man really doesn't have a 3rd act. Here's the thing. I always say, like, as I'm sure you do and everything you do, I always wish I were better at what I do, as everybody does. And, listen, the 3-act structure is not from gurus, right? That's from Poetics by Aristotle. So, yes, the three we are used to hearing stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and reach a crescendo, and then have a denouement. That stuff is sort of where maybe hardwired, or we've been acculturated to it. But the main thing is that there are a lot of people who are selling a lot of bullshit about how to become proficient at writing screenplays, as though that should be sort of a career path. And I just think that those things all have a chilling effect on people. They think, oh, am I doing it wrong? And so, for me, the things that were a miracle were I read Awaken the Giant Within in my 20s, and I realized I had to dive deep and figure out what I wanted to be and then not be too scared to pursue it. And then I read The Artist's Way, and I did the morning pages. And those things combined with I practice transcendental meditation, so I meditate twice a day. And, like, those things freed me a lot from worrying about all this external stuff. And I just think that if you're somebody who wants to express themselves creatively or wants to do it for your life, many of the things that are holding you back, it's not actually information. You can find the information. Hey, what's a properly formatted screenplay look like? Very easily. The hard thing is to turn off the voice telling you suck. And it could be the voice of a teacher who hated you, or it could be your own voice or your brother's voice. And so that's what I want to help people turn off, is that voice that represents Philip Roth. Oh, I could never be as great as him, so why should I ever pick up a pen? And I just think if you can silence that voice for the first draft, that's great. I'll say the piece that people leave out is because yes, I talk about pursuing the dreams, but you rightly point out that it took me 2 years and I never stopped with Tracey, or Rounders got rejected by a lot of people at first. I've told the story many times, but so for me, it's figure out what the dream thing is, dive deep, and then just never stop working towards it. Don't
and I want to
stop working towards it.
I want to get to the Rounders rejections because so you were at Rounders, and by the way, I don't know. Did you write it from scratch? You weren't like taking another novel and then writing a screenplay on top of it. You wrote it from scratch, right?
Oh yeah, David and I invented the whole thing. Of course, yeah, a wholly original story. Yeah, all original and made up.
Again, great story. And then I can't believe you went around to every agent and they all said no.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I wrote about it at briankoppelman.com, and you can, I write about sort of all this stuff there. And I would just say that they all rejected it. They all made up these crazy reasons. And then the day after Harvey Weinstein bought it, all the same agents called us and they said, sign with us. And back then, you remember every rejection so keenly when you're doing this at the beginning. And I had written it all down. So I was able to say, some guy called and would say, oh, I think it's brilliant. And I'd say, no, you said it was overwritten. And he'd say, well, no, that was my assistant who read it, or some dumb reader, or I only read the first 2 pages. They just lied. It taught me everything I needed to know about, supposed authorities and what their real motive is. I mean, their motive is self-interest. And so, you can't ever take their view as a value on the thing's actual artistic merit. You have to just know that they haven't yet understood why there is the possibility of some kind of utility for them in the thing.
Now, you talked about how do you shut off that voice that says you suck, because not only do you have to shut off that voice during the creative process, but you also have to shut off that voice during the business process when everybody else is telling you suck.
Well, yeah, it's very hard to do that, right? It's a practice, isn't it, to figure that out? I mean, don't you have to do that when you have an idea? I mean, I love the thing you talk about. I love the thing you talk about the, having the 10 ideas a day and making sure that you write that down. And because the practice of just doing that and of realizing that you're an endless font of ideas is really great and super empowering.
And again, you probably get that from the fact that you have been reading so much and you do write every day. That gives you a certain confidence that your voice doesn't suck, no matter what people say.
But don't you think you have to I'll tell you, for me, we all have periods where we don't feel impervious, right? We all have moments where we worry that those voices are correct, or I think most of us have moments where we worry about that. The thing is that if you can somehow put some kind of a practice in
That's the key.
that like for me, it's writing in the morning pages and meditating, and I take really long walks. And if you can put some kind of practice in, then you're getting the reps in so that, oh, I feel crappy. Okay, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to take a long walk. Oh, I remember who I am now. Okay, I remember what makes me feel good. And then I'm a different person.
But now, when you were writing Solitary Man, you mentioned you were feeling a little stuck. What got you past that?
Well, I really think part of it was doing stand-up. I really do, because facing that rejection was just like super potent, and
it's hard to start stand-up at the age of 40.
Really hard. And I didn't do it in a Hollywood way. Like, I didn't have anyone make calls for me or anything like that. I just showed up at open mics and took a comedy class even, which was crazy, and at first I didn't want anyone to know what I really did, because by that time I'd already made 5 movies or something like that. But I did the whole thing, open mics, and it was, people always talk about humbling, and it's the opposite of what they mean. They don't know what that word really means, but it was that. And it was a part of this practice of like reducing down and being willing to face this rejection and learning how to marshal my inner resources again.
That's almost a movie, like a guy who is blocked in some way, and in order to avoid his own toxicity, goes into stand-up, which is basically a world of mostly young people at these open mics. Young people and shitty bars at open mics, and there you were at 40 trying to do it. That strikes me as a story.
Yes, no, I'm sure that it is, and I've written about it a little bit, and I'll write about it more. But I mean, all of this, and I only have a couple of minutes because I actually have to do a thing. But I would say that I love your podcast, and I learn from it every week, because I'm fascinated by the way business people think and people who sort of create new modes of doing anything. And then my podcast, which is called The Moment with Brian Koppelman, is I talk to people in all creative walks of life, and would love to talk to you on there about how people who accomplish remarkable things process the inflection points, like the big up or down moments. And so for some reason, this has been something that's fascinated me since I was young. How do you continue to move towards these breakthroughs and get to the next level of whatever you are? And how do you not lie to yourself? And how do you keep challenging yourself? It's just been a thing that's like really animating, and from a very young age. And I love that there are so many people now engaged in trying to solve this stuff. And I think you end up talking to a bunch of those people. So I'm wondering are you going to write a book out of all this, another book that's out of sort of like this collected wisdom that you're now gleaning?
Yeah, I'm probably going to write a bunch of books, because I've been learning, it's basically like how I wrote to you today and I said, hey, are you available in an hour? Rather than getting into the whole scheduling mess of podcasts, just like anybody who interests me. I mean, 2 hours ago, I spoke to Clayton Anderson, who is an astronaut. He has spent 200 days in space. So anybody who interests me for any reason, I want to talk to them and find out how they did it.
Me too. That's awesome.
I learned so much. You must learn from your podcast.
I do. That's one of my it's what I love about doing it. These are conversations I would have anyway. I always said one of the sort of unintended consequences of getting to do what I do or what you do is it gives you this platform from which you can reach out and talk to almost anybody. And I've always taken, as you have, and I've heard you talk, I've always taken advantage of that. So if there's a writer I'm interested in, if there's anyone in any walk of life, I know that within a phone call or two or an email or two, I can get to them and try to have coffee or dinner, because there's an exchange. There's something that we each have that the other one might be interested in. And so that's what led me to think, this would be a great thing to do on the podcast so that other people could benefit from these conversations that I'm having anyway. Yeah. I love doing that. That's why I thought your pod, when you wrote me, whenever it was a couple months ago, I thought like, this is super cool, because you're doing the same kind of thing in a really interesting way.
Well, so Brian, I really appreciate you spending the time. I know people can find you at briankoppelman.com. It's Koppelman.com.
Yeah, I have a couple of ways they can reach me that way. They can email me at themomentbk@gmail.com. Just never email me a movie idea or a movie script. If you do, I'll delete it and I'll tweet out who you are, and it'll be horrible for you. But send me anything else, any questions or anything like that, and I'm on Twitter @Brian Koppelman.
And also, again, I have to recommend Solitary Man, just in case you haven't seen it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, James. And I got to say, man, you're in New York and so am I. Let's meet and have one of those coffees.
Definitely. I'll talk to you
All
soon,
right.
Brian. Thanks.
Great. See ya. Bye.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network at stansberryradio.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Are you ready to take control of your future and be your own boss? At Neighborly, we'll help you go into business for yourself, but not by yourself. As a Neighborly franchise owner, you'll join a community with thousands of passionate and experienced entrepreneurs. With 19 franchise brands providing a variety of home service needs, you'll benefit from decades of established systems and support. Learn more about Neighborly franchising by downloading your free guide at go.nbly.com/podcast.